Joe Rogan is no stranger to controversy, but sometimes his podcast takes a turn so awkward, even he can't joke his way out of it. From heated debates about the shape of the earth to guests storming into personal territory, these moments aren't just uncomfortable, they're unforgettable. But hey, before we dive into this ocean of tension, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every subscription helps me afford the gallon of coffee it takes to sit through another 3-hour Joe Rogan spiral. When Candace Owens said climate change wasn't real. The episode started like any other until Candace Owens casually dropped the bomb. She doesn't believe in climate change. Joe's eyes lit up, not with agreement, but with here we go energy. Candace insisted she didn't litter, but also didn't buy into global warming.
You don't think we have to care about the environment? Like, what do you...
Not even a little bit.
Not even a little bit?
No. Okay, let me clarify this. I don't throw trash on the ground. Like, okay. I'm not saying like we need to trash the environment. Like, but do I believe in climate change? No.
Joe leaned in, calm but firm, pushing back on her claims and asking for clarity. Then Jamie, Joe's trusty producer, pulled up stats showing 87% of scientists agree that human activity is driving climate change. Candace doubled down, unmoved by facts. Joe emphasized the potential collapse of coastal cities, stressing it wasn't just propaganda, but a serious issue backed by decades of data. Despite the pressure, Candace stuck to her guns until she eventually conceded that she wasn't completely informed. It was a slow, tense unraveling, like watching a car inch toward a wall in slow motion. The time Dave Portnoy got schooled on boxing. When Barstool founder Dave Portnoy dismissed Tommy Fury as not a real boxer, Joe didn't just disagree, he detonated. What began as a casual debate quickly spiraled into Joe yelling over Dave to shut the fucking up while replaying footage of Fury in the ring. Portnoy accused the footage of being in slow motion. Joe nearly lost it. "That's not slow motion," he said, voice rising. "You're just being a hater."
I saw Tommy Fury box. He is not a boxer.
Well, he's definitely a boxer.
Well, he puts on gloves.
He's definitely a boxer. But is he a boxer like his brother? No.
What should have been a fun sports debate turned into an uncomfortable brawl of egos, with Joe trying to prove a point using video playback like a coach reviewing a bad call. In the end, nothing was resolved. But viewers were left wondering if they'd just witnessed the first podcast-based boxing beef in history, Crowder versus Weed, and everything else. Steven Crowder thought he had a solid take when he claimed marijuana. Legalization was linked to a spike in traffic fatalities. Joe didn't just disagree, he called it nonsense to his face. What followed was less of a conversation and more of a slow-motion train wreck. Crowder talked over Joe. Joe told him to stop interrupting.
The sources there, the original studies.
Just because someone gets in an accident and they're high. Hold on, stop.
No, hold on a second.
You interrupt way too much. You need to stop.
And suddenly they were trading personal jabs. Joe brought up peer-reviewed studies. Crowder dismissed them. Crowder brought up his own sources. Joe said he didn't care about his website. What began as a policy debate ended with Joe mocking Crowder's data and Crowder accusing Joe of dodging facts. At one point, it felt like they were arguing just for the sake of arguing, and it was painful to watch. The rock, paper, scissors power play. It started as a joke, just a friendly challenge to play rock, paper, scissors. The stakes? The guest would get to control Joe's show programming for a week. Harmless fun, right? Not for Joe. He instantly shut it down, refusing to entertain the idea, not even hypothetically. "You don't have anything that's worth that," he said bluntly. "There's nothing you could give me that I couldn't buy myself."
Why are you so good at rock, paper, scissors?
It's just, skill, muscle, intuition.
Intuition. Can we play right now?
You want to play?
Yes.
Oh, but I only play for stakes.
It came off more arrogant than assertive, and the tone in the room changed fast. The awkward silence that followed wasn't about the game. It was about Joe drawing a line that felt oddly intense for such a ridiculous request. When grief met glitches, UFC fighter Joe Schilling sat across from Joe Rogan, opening up about the worst fight camp of his life, one marked by grief and loss. As he spoke about his dad and cousin passing away within days of each other, Joe cut in. But not to offer sympathy. Instead, he interrupted to ask Jamie why the video feed looked so crappy. Schilling tried to continue, but the emotional weight was already lost. The clip became infamous, not for the story, but for the jarring insensitivity. Fans couldn't tell if Joe was distracted, uncomfortable, or just unaware of the emotional gravity unfolding in front of him.
It was a really tough fight for me too. It was a really bad camp. It was probably the worst camp of my career. My dad had passed away like 3 weeks before the fight, and like 2 or 3 days after that,
Why does that look so shitty, Jamie?
my cousin passed away.
Eddie Bravo's Flat Earth Crusade. When Eddie Bravo joined Joe to talk about his infamous belief in a flat Earth, viewers expected fireworks. What they got was a full-on conspiracy explosion. Eddie accused NASA of lying, said satellite photos were fake, and demanded a real picture of the globe. Joe, already familiar with Eddie's rabbit holes, tried to push back with logic, but Eddie was deep in his own orbit. The debate went on for 40 straight minutes, filled with interruptions, eye rolls, and wild theories. At one point, Joe just stared at him, saying, "You don't think I've looked into this?" The conversation felt like a tug of war with no rope, just a black hole of stubbornness. The nutrition debate that went off the rails. In one episode, 2 diet specialists sat across from each other with a mountain of charts, studies, and opinions, none of which matched. They talked over each other, corrected each other, and eventually just started throwing jabs. Joe tried to mediate, but it was like refereeing a food fight between 2 Harvard grads. "You keep acting like I'm an idiot," one guest said. "Well, maybe you are," the other fired back. Joe's face during that exchange? Pure regret. By the end, no one cared about carbs or calories. It was just academic mudslinging disguised as science. Politics, pride, and pure tension. Politics always brings the heat, but Joe's episodes with Matt Walsh, Milo Yiannopoulos, and Adam Conover took it to another level. Walsh argued that gay marriage ruins traditional family values. Joe pushed back hard. Milo insisted that only countries with Judeo-Christian values were morally sound. Joe called that ridiculous. The debates were passionate, but they also dipped into personal identity, sexuality, and faith, turning the table into a philosophical battleground.
Then why are you opposed to 2 gay people doing that?
Well, because again, it's not about choice. It's about what this institution, marriage is an institution, and what is it, and what purpose does it serve?
Then came the conversation about transgender athletes with Adam Conover. Joe argued that transitioning, late in life and competing against women wasn't a level playing field. Adam disagreed, pushing back on Joe's assumptions, and soon they were in a deadlock. The debate turned from data to ethics, and neither side budged an inch. It was intense, emotional, and incredibly polarizing for viewers. Paul Stamets and the dangerous question. When Joe asked mycologist Paul Stamets about the dangers of a certain type of mushroom, he got a surprising answer. That question could put my life in danger. Joe froze. Stamets didn't elaborate, just stared in silence. The vibe shifted immediately. Joe apologized and quickly moved on, visibly rattled. It wasn't the kind of answer you expect when you're talking fungi, but it left viewers wondering, what exactly does Paul Stamets know? And more importantly, why can't he talk about it?
What are the negative benefit or the negative effects of this?
This is an explosive area of conversation, and it puts my life in danger. So I reserve the right not to answer your question.
The conversation that derailed itself. In an episode with Jordan Peterson, the 2 spiraled so far off topic, they forgot what they were talking about, literally. Peterson paused, looked around, and said, "I don't remember what you asked me." Joe didn't either. "I'm distracted," he admitted. There was an awkward beat of silence before they awkwardly pivoted to a new subject. It was the podcast equivalent of walking into a room and forgetting why you're there, except thousands of people were watching in real time.
You know, you can say, well, yeah, I've got all these flaws, but look at what I'm trying to do. Right. That's the real ground of self-respect.
The Tyson tension and the Erect comment. Just when things couldn't get weirder, Mike Tyson dropped this gem. What does it mean when fighting gets you erect? Joe tried to laugh it off, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. "No, I'm serious," Tyson said, stone-faced. "It's orgasmic sometimes." The room went dead silent. Joe blinked. "No one will understand that other than you," he muttered. Tyson's intensity combined with his vulnerability turned the moment from awkward to existential in 5 seconds flat. It was both raw and bizarre, classic Tyson, and an unforgettable Joe Rogan moment.
I did that video and I was in bed for a week. That was 30 seconds and I was in bed for a week. And it's not funny because it made me realize that this is big boy, okay?
Big boy.
This big boy without,
there it is right there.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan's podcast is often insightful, sometimes wild, and occasionally jaw-droppingly tense. These uncomfortable moments might not always be his proudest, but they're the ones people can't stop talking about. They remind us that even the most experienced hosts can't predict how a live conversation will unfold. And sometimes that's where the magic, or the chaos, happens. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Rogan's cringiest and most controversial podcast moments, hit that like button, share it with someone who thinks the earth is flat, and of course, subscribe. Every single sub helps me afford another overpriced coffee so I can stay awake while editing all this madness. Until next time, stay awkward, my friends.